Hey everybody, Tim here with tonight's episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 7, Episode 15, Lower Decks. So before I get into this too far, I just want to bring up that this is it. We're in the last 10 episodes of The Next Generation. So I'm going to try to fly through it really quick because I'm super excited to get to Deep Space Nine. And on top of that, I think it's interesting that, so like I said, this episode's about Lower Decks, or it's called Lower Decks, and it's kind of about the ensigns of the Enterprise kind of looking to see everybody else. I mean, it's the background characters that we don't really pay attention to, the red shirts, if you will. And like this is a good time, or it's an interesting time, I guess I should say, depending on who you are, to be a Star Trek fan, because like right now we have the movies, which nobody really knows what's going on, if we're going to get a fourth movie or not. There's the Star Trek Discovery show, which, I mean, some people love it, some people hate it, some people are in between, but it's at least a Star Trek show. It's the first Star Trek show since Enterprise went off the air. Let's see, we got, that show is supposed to be getting a spin-off that's all about Section 31. Patrick Stewart is coming back for a Jean-Luc Picard TV show. And their Nickelodeon is doing an animated series by one of the writers of Rick and Morty called Lower Decks. Now that one doesn't have to do with the Enterprise, but it's kind of the same premise. It's all about the people that you usually ignore. So, I mean, it's just kind of an interesting topic. I wanted to bring that up with this title. So for those quick sidebar, what do you guys think about all of these different Star Trek stuff going on at once? Now, for this show, it's a good episode. It's an interesting episode because, like I said, it kind of shows a new perspective of the bridge crew, if you will. So, Cedo Jaxa, is that how you say her name? I don't even know. So we saw her in First Duty. She was one of the cadets that was part of the investigation that Wesley was in when one of the cadets got killed. And so now she's on board the Enterprise, and she repraises her role. And this episode focuses around four of the ensigns. And they're all trying to promote, and they're trying to like live up to their potential and stuff. Now, during all of this, the bridge crew, we kind of see what's going on, but from their perspective. And we have a Cardassian on board, and they're trying to send him back. That's about all we know. Now, first off, I want to mention that it's interesting that two of these ensigns talk about being roommates. Like, over and over again throughout the series, we've always heard, like, oh, the rooms are so big. Like, I think it was Scotty. It was like, even an admiral wouldn't have quarters this big. Well, evidently, if you're an ensign, you get a roommate. And he says, like, he wants to promote to a lieutenant, so then he gets his own quarter. So it's kind of interesting. And it's fun to hear all their little speculations of who was in the escape pod. And one of them throws out, like, oh, I think it was Ambassador Spock. So they keep that in the story that, hey, we have seen Spock before, but, I mean, not this time. And he is still out there. So it's kind of interesting. Now, as the episode progresses, we get different perspectives. One of the ensigns thinks that Riker hates him. During the same time, Riker thinks he's just a suck-up. And it's kind of fun. One of my favorite characters in this episode is Ben, the bartender, who clearly was kind of a replacement for Guinan because Whoopi Goldberg was busy with her film career, and so they had to get somebody new. So they get Ben, and he's kind of a fun character. I liked him. Because you see him playing poker with the ensigns, and then he goes and plays poker with the bridge crew, and he's just kind of bouncing back and forth like with all the gossip. So I liked him. He was fun. Now, during this, they've decided that the Cardassian has to go back, and it has to look like he has a prisoner. So they get Saito, to basically pretend to be his Bajoran prisoner. And that's some really interesting scenes where she goes to talk to Picard, and Picard just lays into her about how she's a disgrace to Starfleet and brings up the First Duty stuff. And then she comes back with like a new, like trying to be brave. And he's like, I did that on purpose, and you're on board because I wanted you. So then he sends her with this Cardassian to pretend to be a prisoner. And you could tell, I think it was just kind of bad film editing, because with the music and the way people were acting, you knew she was not coming back. And it was unfortunate because, like, I mean, maybe it softened the blow, but personally, I would have rather of them, like, everybody's sure she's going to come back and nobody cares. They're like, yeah, I'll see you next week. But she goes with this Cardassian, and then when they're supposed to be at the rendezvous, there's only debris. And it turns out that in an official Cardassian report, a Bajoran prisoner tried to escape and was killed. Which this is one of the first, like, I mean, we've seen other people die on the Enterprise, Tasha Yar, for example, but this one really kind of hit, just because she was so young, and Picard basically sent her to her death. And it was just a sad episode, and it was interesting because sometimes we forget that this is a military type show, or like an organization, and deaths happen all the time. And so I don't know, it was interesting. And like, I kind of made the joke, it's all about the red shirts, because that's a joke that everybody says, like, oh, if you're wearing a red shirt, you're gonna die, because background characters die all the time in Star Trek, and we never pay attention to them. This kind of shows that perspective, like, they have families and friends as well. So it's interesting. For those who have seen this one, oh, and I guess the actress that played Sido was offered the role to come back in Deep Space Nine. Like, maybe she didn't die, she was actually just captured, but it never came about, which is disappointing. I've read a lot about Deep Space Nine because I'm getting ready to do that show next, and there's a lot of people that were offered to come back in roles and stuff, but for whatever reason it just never materialized, and it's kind of disappointing. So for those who have seen this one, what did you guys think? Did you guys like this episode? Did you like this perspective? I know there's a Voyager episode that's very similar to this as well. So go ahead, let me know what you guys think about this perspective. What did you guys think about Picard sending her to what ended up being her death? Like, did you think that she was going to die, or did you think she was going to come back and it was happily ever after? Go ahead, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for everything. You guys are all amazing, and I will see you guys next time for Thine Own Self.